Good morning, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this very impressive event with so many dignitaries and people who are at the forefront of issues on cyber and security. My name is Betsy Broder, and I'm here with my colleague Sunil from Wipro. And it's a rather unusual topic at a cyber conference to talk about call center fraud. But as I was just discussing with someone, the telephone doesn't exist anymore, right? The telephone is the internet. And so crimes or activities that are conducted over the phone take on the world of cyber because the threat and the solution is sometimes the same as when we're dealing with other objects. One of the things that I appreciate about having the opportunity for this panel is looking at the issue of cyber from a slightly different perspective. So we're talking about intrusions and data loss and data protection. But sometimes cyber violations, what they hurt are individual consumers when there's fraud that is perpetrated by using the internet or having to do with computers. So that's what we're going to talk about this morning in our brief period of time. And I think the setup will be, I'll speak briefly, Sunil will maybe have conversation back and forth, and if there's an opportunity for questions, we would love to hear from you as well. So let me first describe, my name is Betsy Broder. I'm an attorney at the U.S. Federal Trade Commission. We are the country's consumer protection agency. We're an enforcement agency. And although we do not have criminal enforcement authority, we are able to sue companies and individuals who are engaged in unfair or deceptive acts and practices. Their assets can be frozen, their companies can be shut down, they can be required to comply with the legal provisions and prohibited from engaging in the other sorts of conduct that gave rise to the lawsuit to begin with. So in that capacity, about 8 years ago, we started seeing complaints coming in that people were getting phone calls that they were about to be arrested because they had failed to pay back a loan, or that they were being contacted by debt collectors because they had taken out a loan and had not paid it off. What was curious about this is many of the people who were getting these phone calls had applied for a payday loan. A payday loan is a loan that you take out with a very high interest rate in anticipation of getting your paycheck and then being able to pay it off. The people who most likely will apply for these payday loans are not eligible for any other kind of traditional loan, so they take out a high interest loan. So they've gone online, they've been shopping online. You are in debt, and unless you pay this debt immediately, you will be arrested. Well, I'm kind of panicky because indeed I did apply for a loan. I probably got a loan, and many people paid thousands of dollars, money that they did not have, to pay off these loans that were phantom. Someone had gotten the list of the online applications for payday loans and called those people. So we brought a couple lawsuits suing these companies, and what we found out were the calls were coming from India. Somehow or other, they had gotten these lists of applicants for loans, and they were using those to call U.S. consumers to defraud them of money for these loans which did not exist. So we were a little bit frustrated in that. All of the defendants were based in India. All the money was going to India. There was one individual based in California who was involved in this and was a party to our lawsuit, and he ultimately was prosecuted criminally for his involvement. But what we found was that the people who were really behind these schemes were beyond the jurisdiction of U.S. courts. And so we realized we had to kind of look for new solutions. And while we were looking for new solutions, something else happened. Hello, madam. I'm calling from Microsoft, Symantec, whoever. We've detected a virus on your computer, and unless you immediately let us remote into your computer, you will lose all of the information on your PC. So I got a call from my Aunt Doris, 90 years old. Aunt Doris said, Betsy, my computer's going to crash. Someone called me up and said that I'm going to lose all of the data on my computer, and it's legitimate. It's Microsoft. And that's the software I use. And I said, no, Doris, it's not legitimate. Please don't pay them hundreds of dollars. And so luckily she didn't. But many hundreds of thousands of people did. And why? Because there was a sense of urgency that if they didn't do anything right away, they would lose all of the information on their computer. So again, at the Federal Trade Commission, we thought we need to take action here. So we brought a series of lawsuits. We worked closely with our colleagues in Canada and in Australia, where there also were a lot of these phone calls coming in, these cold calls, saying people's computers were going to crash and all sorts of problems. And again, what we found out was most of the phone calls were coming from India. All the money was going to India. Some of it routed through Hawala, going through China and various other permutations. But there was a really serious problem there. So there was kind of a basic fraud, though. Cold calls to people, threatening urgent problems, just like the phantom debt collection. You need to act before you think. And they would pay by various means, sometimes Western Union or MoneyGram, and that was the payment of choice. We brought these cases, and at the same time, we were working with the industry in India, with the call center industry, and the business processing outsourcing industry. Why should they care? Well, a colleague of mine, in speaking to the industry group, said, India does not want to become the next Nigeria. That sort of sucked the oxygen out of the room. But we don't want to come to a situation where a very legitimate source of income and revenue and jobs in India becomes threatened because when people hear an Indian accent, they think there's a fraudster on the other end of the phone. So we had these calls with cold calls. Madam, there is a virus on your computer. We actually had recorded some of those calls and used those as evidence in the court. One of them was, I won't say amusing because it's sort of sad, but our investigator called up. She said, you had called me about a problem, and they said, yes, madam, log into this. They show the event viewer screen, and kind of green checks and red X's, and they say, madam, are there any X's on your screen? Yes, there are. Oh, that's a serious problem, almost like back away from your computer. This thing may blow any minute. And indeed, it is a real problem. The courts were able to only exercise jurisdiction, so we brought our lawsuits, but all the defendants we found were in India. So not a very successful outcome. The crimes evolved. The crimes evolved. So let me read a little bit from some of the complaints that we got at the FTC. This is the new variation. A pop-up on the computer stated that we had a Zeus virus, which locked up the computer. We needed to call Microsoft at a toll-free number to have the problem resolved. So this consumer spent $875 to cure a non-existent problem. Another consumer reports, after pop-ups had been coming up for a couple of days, a system message popped up from Windows Service saying that my computer was under attack. Someone was trying to access my personal information and bank accounts, blah, blah, blah. Then they get a telephone number to call. So this person very desperately called the telephone number. And the so-called technical assistance person was able to remote into this person's computer. He scrolled, hit OK, and told me to electronically sign. Before telling me to sign any time, I'd accidentally nudged the mouse. And he yelled at me, ma'am, please do not touch your computer. So there's a sense of urgency and everything has to happen right away. And this person paid $250 for a 1-year subscription. Is this a problem unique to India? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The FTC has brought cases. We have our own homegrown tech support industry at home. What we have found is that there is a real problem in India. So what have we done about this? Well, we have been very graciously welcomed by the industry in India, NASCOM, the trade association. We have had a series of roundtable meetings here in New Delhi. We've had 2 in Washington, and they've included law enforcement. We've had the CBI. We have had the UP cyber unit. We have had the Thane police participated in the last meeting to come up with a comprehensive solution to deal with this. Meanwhile, while all of this is happening, another fraud evolves. I was going to play a recording on my phone, but I won't. But everyone we know has received these calls in the US. It starts with a recording in an American accent. We're calling from the Internal Revenue Service. We have tried to contact you. You have not paid your taxes, and you are at risk of being arrested unless you immediately pay your taxes. So you call this telephone number. It's an American telephone number. And of course, but it's all voice over internet, so it's coming back to India. A lot of the numbers are indicated as US government telephone numbers. And people are told not only are they behind in their taxes, and they'll be threatened to be arrested. I know this quite well because I was sitting at my desk in Washington last August, and the phone rang, and it was a young man. He was working in a call center in Thane. He said, I want to report what I'm doing because it's harming people all over the world. And I am calling up people and telling them that they owe money, they owe taxes, and it feels wrong what I'm doing. But every now and then his manager would walk behind him and he would suddenly say, and madam, therefore you need to go immediately to the Walmart and buy iTunes cards for $500 or $700 or however much I owed. So people were paying through iTunes cards to pay off this debt. So that's the latest iteration of this fraud. So what are the solutions? There are at least 3 ways of dealing with this. The first is law enforcement. And on that front, I think we've been pretty gratified. We have seen the arrests in Thane of 70 individuals who were working in a call center that employed 700 people doing nothing but these IRS impersonation scams or Canadian Revenue Association, or they're also doing in Australia. Thank you. And so law enforcement will continue in India and the US. We also know that education is critical and that technology can be a solution, and that's why I think having all of you in the room is so essential. I see our time is going up. I've taken too much, so I'm going to defer to Sunil.
Just for a clarity, to give a better clarity, Betsy is the person who actually worked on cracking the Thane Meera Road case. The person who called her was the 2 employees who was working in that call center. That is where this US has taken up this IRS scam and cracked the entire thing up. And currently those people is also been convicted by the court. So that was a major whistleblower case which she has taken up in US. A month back, I have attended one of her conferences or a session in Washington where FBI and FTC, IRS, everybody was involved. What is coming out from there was, this is a big scam. It is a part of Hawala was involved. And the second route, the money was going to the China, with the gray market where the iTunes and gift cards numbers were going to the gray market of China where they don't have a direct access. And one of the statement in US they have put in this meeting was the tarnishing call center image of India due to the thick Indian accent in the fraudulent calls. This is a reality where many of the agents working in call center is not even aware they are part of the scam. But unfortunately, they have been pawned by 1 or 2 people in the entire scam. A lot is happening. US is watching very closely. For the interest of time, I'm stopping here.
So what is essential here is the critical relationship between law enforcement and industry. And I think the idea of sharing information, of being able to identify what the threats look like, learn from industry what they are seeing on their schemes, and also relying on industry to develop technologies. 10 years ago, I would open up my internet and there would be spam all over the place. You know, it's like delete, 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 delete. Now we've developed rules and algorithms that detect the spam. Why can't we do that with telephone calls? The voice over internet calls where we can detect patterns that indicate fraud. So technology is really important. But we also need to teach consumers in this country, in every country, of what the red flags are for fraud, how they can detect and protect themselves from fraud. But at the end of the day, it's also criminal acts that we need to deal with. So we are very encouraged by law enforcement around the world, particularly in India, that are taking this crime seriously. Are there victims? Are there individual victims in India? Not consumers. But as Sunil said, They're real victims in terms of the industry and the reputation of the call center industry. So for all of you from industry, we look to you for your partnership. From law enforcement, we need you to take these crimes seriously, to help promote the arrest and prosecution, anything that raises the cost of doing business. And all of us have a responsibility for educating the public about how to be safe and savvy consumers online. And with that, again, we thank the organization and COCON for allowing us to talk about this critical problem, and wish the rest of you a wonderful conference for the next day and a half. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sunil, very much.